The ballroom went silent. A little girl stood frozen in the corner, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. The music was too loud. She was 8 years old and terrified. Her mother, CEO Maya Solaris, reached out, but the girl pulled away. Guests whispered. Nobody knew what to do. Then a janitor stepped forward. Noah Carter was cleaning floors, invisible to everyone. But he saw what nobody else saw. He knelt down, extended his hand, moved it slowly, rhythmically. She looked at him, then placed her tiny hand in his. The entire ballroom froze. Noah Carter didn't belong in this room. He was 37, a single dad, a night shift janitor at Solaris Corporation. His uniform was gray, his presence invisible. That's how it always was. But tonight was different. The company was hosting a charity gala. Cameras everywhere, investors in tailored suits, crystal chandeliers reflecting off marble floors. Noah pushed his cleaning cart to the side, stayed quiet, stayed out of the way. Then he saw her, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, standing alone near the wall. She wore a white dress, her hands covered her ears. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Noah recognized that look. His son Max used to do the same thing, when sounds got too loud, when the world became too much. The girl's mother rushed over. Maya Solaris, CEO of the entire corporation, powerful, elegant, in control of everything, except this. Maya knelt down, tried to hug her daughter, but the girl twisted away, started rocking back and forth. People stared. Someone laughed. Quiet, cruel, can't even control her own kid. Maya's face went pale. She whispered something to her daughter. The girl shook her head violently. Noah watched from across the room, his chest tightened. He knew exactly what was happening. Sensory overload, too much noise, too much light, too many people. The girl wasn't throwing a tantrum. She was drowning, and nobody here understood. Maya stood up, smiled apologetically at the guests. Her hands trembled slightly. Noah saw the shame in her eyes, the helplessness. He'd felt that same shame 1,000 times, standing in grocery stores while Max melted down, sitting in school offices while teachers suggested medication, watching other parents pull their kids away. The girl dropped to the floor, started hitting her head against the wall, not hard, just rhythmic, trying to ground herself. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man in an expensive suit turned to his companion, loud enough for others to hear. If she can't manage her family, how can we trust her with our investments? Maya froze, her jaw clenched. The girl's distress escalated. She screamed. Not words, just sound. Raw. Desperate. Security guards moved forward. They didn't know what to do, just knew something needed to happen. Noah set down his mop. His hands were still wet. His knees ached from hours of kneeling on hard floors. But he moved anyway, because he recognized something in that little girl, something nobody else in this glittering room could see. She wasn't broken. She wasn't misbehaving. She was communicating the only way she could. Noah had spent 3 years learning that language, with Max, through tears and frustration and hundreds of failed attempts. He learned to watch hands instead of faces, to listen to breathing instead of words, to move slowly, to match rhythms instead of forcing his own. The girl's name was Ari. He'd heard Maya say it earlier. Ari was stuck in a cycle now, panicking, feeding her own fear, and everyone was making it worse, crowding closer, talking louder, trying to fix something they didn't understand. Noah took a breath. Then he stepped forward, into the light, into a world that usually pretended he didn't exist. He had no authority here, no credentials, no right to intervene, just experience and empathy, and the certainty that if nobody helped this child right now, she'd remember this moment forever. As the night the world proved it had no place for her, Noah couldn't let that happen. The music got louder. Someone had requested a faster song. The DJ obliged. Bass pounded through the speakers. Ari's hands flew back to her ears. She dropped to her knees. Maya reached for her again. "Sweetheart, please." But Ari couldn't hear her, couldn't process anything beyond the overwhelming assault of sensation. The lights started flashing, part of the show, synchronized to the beat. Ari screamed louder. People backed away, created a circle around her like she was contaminated. A woman in diamonds whispered to her husband, "Why would she bring her here?" Another voice, clearly not equipped for public events. Maya's face burned. She'd worked so hard to keep Ari's diagnosis private, to protect her daughter from judgment. But now everyone knew, everyone saw, and they were blaming her for being a bad mother, for not fixing her child. The investor who'd spoken earlier stepped closer. Richard Morrison, gray hair, cold eyes. He looked at Maya with open disdain. Solaris, if you cannot manage your personal life, perhaps the board should reconsider your position. Maya stood up slowly, her hands shook. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had no idea what her life was like, no idea how hard she fought every single day. But she couldn't, not here, not in front of cameras. So she just stood there, silent, humiliated. Ari collapsed completely, curled into a ball on the floor, sobbing. Security moved in. One guard reached for her. "No." Maya stepped between them. "Don't touch her." But she didn't know what else to do. Ari wouldn't let Maya touch her either. Not when she was like this. Noah was 10 feet away now, watching, calculating. He saw the patterns, the same ones Max used to show. Ari was rocking, left to right, consistent rhythm. That was her trying to self-regulate. Her feet were tapping, fast, frantic. She needed movement, needed to discharge the overwhelming energy. Her eyes kept darting to the corner. The darkest spot in the room. She was looking for escape, for safety. Noah understood all of it. He turned off his floor buffer. The sudden absence of that mechanical hum created a pocket of quiet. Then he walked forward, slowly, not directly toward Ari. That would be threatening. Instead, he moved to the side, into her peripheral vision, where she could see him without feeling cornered. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, lower than her, non-threatening. People stared at him. A janitor, sitting on the pristine marble floor in the middle of a gala. But Noah ignored them. His entire focus was on Ari. He started rocking gently, matching her rhythm exactly. Left, right, left, right. Ari's crying faltered. Just for a second, she noticed. Noah kept going, didn't look directly at her, didn't speak, just mirrored her movement. Maya watched, confused, hopeful, terrified. After 30 seconds, Ari's rocking slowed, just slightly. Noah slowed his too, staying synchronized. Then he added something new. He raised his hand, moved it in a slow wave pattern, up and down, smooth, predictable. It was a grounding technique, something visual to anchor attention, something rhythmic to replace chaos. Ari watched his hand, her breathing steadied, just a fraction. Noah kept the pattern going. His hand moved like a metronome, steady, reliable, safe. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper. "You're okay. The noise is loud, but you're okay." He wasn't trying to make her respond, just offering words, gentle, calm. Ari uncurled slightly, her eyes fixed on his moving hand. Noah very slowly extended his other hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. He kept his movements slow, predictable, every gesture telegraphed. "It's okay," he whispered again. "Follow me." Ari stared at his hand, at the calluses, the scars, hands that worked for a living. Then impossibly she reached out. Her small fingers touched his palm, barely, like a bird landing on a branch. The ballroom went dead silent. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Ari hadn't let anyone touch her during a meltdown. Not doctors, not therapists, not even Maya, but this janitor, this stranger. She trusted him. Noah closed his fingers gently around her hand, so careful, like holding glass. "There you go," he said softly. "You're safe, I've got you." He stood up slowly, helping Ari to her feet. She followed, still crying, still overwhelmed, but no longer alone in it. Noah looked around the room, spotted the exit that led to a service hallway. Dimmer lights, quieter, fewer people. He glanced at Maya, a silent question. Is this okay? Maya nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. Noah led Ari toward the exit. She walked beside him, her hand still in his. The crowd parted, stunned, silent. Richard Morrison stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, the criticism dying on his lips, because a janitor had just done what none of them could, what their money and status and education couldn't accomplish. He'd seen a child, not a problem, not an embarrassment, a child who needed help. And he'd known exactly what to do. Maya followed behind them, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Who was this man? Type respect if you want the full reveal. The service hallway was dim, quiet. The thick door muffled the ballroom noise. Ari's breathing slowed. Her grip on Noah's hand loosened, just slightly. Maya stood behind them, watching, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile connection had formed. Noah knelt down again, eye level with Ari. The music was too loud, wasn't it? He said softly. Ari didn't respond, didn't look at him, but she nodded, barely. That's okay, Noah continued. Sometimes the world is too loud, too bright, too much. He kept his voice low, steady, like a heartbeat. My son is like you, he said. His name is Max. When things get too loud, he needs quiet. When things are too bright, he needs dark. Ari's eyes flickered toward him, just for a second. Max taught me something, Noah said. He taught me that everyone has their own rhythm, their own way of being in the world. He lifted his hand, started moving it again. That same slow wave pattern. Some people like fast rhythms, loud music, lots of people. His hand moved faster, then slowed again. But some people need slower rhythms, gentler sounds, smaller spaces. Ari watched his hand. Her own fingers started to move, mimicking his pattern. Noah smiled. That's it. You've got your own rhythm, and it's perfect. Maya pressed her hand to her chest. She'd spent years trying to help Ari fit into the world's rhythm, never considering that Ari's rhythm was fine exactly as it was. Noah stood up slowly. Can I show you something? Ari looked uncertain, but she didn't pull away. Noah started moving his feet. Simple steps, left, right, nothing fancy, just a basic pattern. Then he moved his hands, up, down, and down, matching his steps. It wasn't dancing, not really. It was more like a sequence, predictable, repeating. This is how Max and I move together, Noah explained. We don't dance like other people. We make our own dance. He extended his hand again, palm up. Want to try? Ari stared at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly, carefully, she placed her hand in his. Noah's smile widened. Okay, just follow my feet. Left, right, left, right. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step telegraphed before he made it. Ari watched his feet, then tried to copy. Her movements were stiff, uncertain, but she was trying. Perfect, Noah said. Now the hands up, down, up, down. He raised their joined hands, lowered them, raised them again. Ari followed, her face focused, concentrating. They moved together in the dimly lit hallway, to no music at all, just rhythm, just pattern, just connection. Maya's tears came freely now. She'd hired specialists, therapists, behavioral analysts, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to help her daughter. And this janitor, this man who made minimum wage cleaning floors, he understood in 5 minutes what all those experts never had. Ari didn't need to be fixed. She needed to be met where she was. After a few minutes, Ari's movements became smoother, more confident. She even smiled, a tiny fleeting expression. Noah saw it, his heart swelled. You're a natural, he said. Max would love to dance with you. Ari looked up at him. Max? It was the first word she'd spoken. Quiet, hesitant, but there. My son, Noah said, he's 9. He loves building patterns with blocks and drawing maps and doing this exact dance we're doing right now. Ari processed that. Like me? Yeah, Noah said gently. Like you. Something shifted in Ari's expression. A spark of recognition. Of hope. She wasn't alone. There was another kid out there who understood, who moved through the world the same way. Maya stepped forward, slowly, carefully. Ari, sweetheart. Ari turned, saw her mother's tear-streaked face, and for the first time that night, she didn't pull away when Maya approached. Instead, Ari let go of Noah's hand and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. Maya collapsed to her knees, held her daughter tight, sobbed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I should never have brought you there. I wasn't thinking. Too loud, Ari said against her mother's shoulder. I know, baby, I know. Maya looked up at Noah through her tears. How did you know what to do? Noah's expression softened. Because I've been where you are, standing in a crowded place, watching my son suffer, not knowing how to help. He paused, remembering. Max was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder when he was 4. His mother left us a year later, said she couldn't handle it. Maya's heart ached for him. So it was just me and Max, Noah continued, and I had no idea what I was doing. I tried everything, forced him into social situations, punished him for meltdowns, thought I could discipline it out of him. His voice cracked slightly. I was so wrong. And I hurt him, made everything worse. He looked at Ari. Then one day I stopped trying to change him. I started watching him instead. Really watching, learning his signals, his patterns, his language. And I realized he'd been trying to communicate with me all along. I just wasn't listening. Maya wiped her eyes. How long did it take? To learn? Years, Noah admitted. I'm still learning, every day. But the moment I stopped seeing his differences as problems and started seeing them as just his way of being, everything changed. He smiled. Max is happy now. He has friends who understand him, teachers who accommodate him, and a dad who finally gets it. Maya stood up slowly, keeping one arm around Ari. You're not just a janitor, are you? Noah shrugged. I clean floors. That's what my paycheck says. But yeah, I'm also a dad, and that's the job that taught me everything that matters. Behind them, the hallway door opened. Richard Morrison stepped through, his expression unreadable. He'd followed them. Watched the whole thing. Mr. Carter, he said stiffly. Noah tensed, prepared for criticism, for being told to get back to work, to mind his own business. But Morrison surprised him. I owe you an apology, the investor said. And Ms. Solaris, I owe you one as well. He looked at Ari. I spoke without understanding. I judged without knowledge. That was wrong. Maya nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. Morrison continued. My grandson was just diagnosed with autism. I've been struggling with it. Didn't want to accept it. His voice roughened. But watching you with this child, the patience, the understanding, maybe there's hope for my grandson too. Noah met his eyes. There's always hope. Just has to look different than what you expected. Morrison nodded slowly, then turned and walked back to the ballroom. Maya looked at Noah, really looked at him. I want to hire you, she said. Noah blinked. I already work here. Not as a janitor, Maya said firmly, as a consultant for a program I'm going to create to help parents like us, like Morrison. Parents who love their kids but don't know how to reach them. Noah's eyes widened. I'm not qualified for that. You're the most qualified person I've ever met, Maya countered. You just saved my daughter, and maybe my career. But more importantly, you showed me that I've been fighting the wrong battle. She looked down at Ari. I've been trying to make the world accept her, when I should have been accepting her first. Ari tugged her mother's sleeve. Can Max come dance with me? Maya laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Absolutely, sweetheart, absolutely. 3 months later. Maya's boardroom looked different. The long mahogany table was gone, replaced with smaller tables, softer lighting, noise-dampening panels on the walls. This wasn't a space for investors anymore. It was a space for families. The Quiet Hearts Initiative, that's what Maya named it. a program for parents raising children with autism, sensory processing disorders, and other neurodivergent conditions. Noah stood at the front of the room. 20 parents sat before him. Some looked exhausted. Some looked hopeful. Most looked desperate for answers. "I'm not a therapist," Noah began. "I'm not a doctor. I'm just a dad who learned the hard way." He clicked to the first slide, a photo of Max, smiling, holding an intricate block tower. "This is my son, Max. He's 9 now, happy, thriving." But it wasn't always that way. Noah shared his story, the meltdowns, the isolation, the mistakes, the breakthrough. The parents leaned forward, recognizing their own struggles in his words. "The biggest thing I learned," Noah said, "stop trying to translate your child into the world's language. Learn to speak theirs." He demonstrated the hand movements he'd used with Ari, the mirroring technique, the grounding patterns. "These aren't cures," he explained. "They're bridges, ways to connect when words fail." A mother raised her hand. "My daughter won't let anyone touch her, not even me." Noah nodded. Max was the same. "I spent a year learning his touch tolerance, where he could handle contact, where he couldn't, what pressure felt good, what felt threatening." He paused. "It's not rejection, it's sensory. And once you understand that, it hurts less." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." After the session, Maya approached. Ari was with her, and beside Ari, holding her hand, was Max. The two kids had become inseparable. They'd invented their own language, a combination of hand signals, drawings, and those rhythmic movements Noah had taught them. "How'd it go?" Maya asked. "Good," Noah said. "Really good. These parents just need to know they're not alone." "You're giving them that," Maya said. "And more." She handed him a folder. "Our first partnership offer. Seattle Children's Hospital wants to implement Quiet Hearts in their neurodevelopmental clinic." Noah stared at the papers. "Seriously?" "Seriously. We've had 17 organizations reach out since the video went viral." The video, someone at the gala had recorded the moment Noah helped Ari, posted it online. It had 30 million views now. Comments flooded with similar stories. Parents thanking him, teachers sharing the techniques with students, therapists incorporating his methods into practice. "This is bigger than I ever imagined," Noah admitted. Maya smiled. "You started a movement by just being a good dad." Ari tugged Noah's sleeve. "Dance?" Noah grinned. "Always," Max joined in. The three of them moved together, that same simple pattern, left, right, up, down. Maya pulled out her phone, captured the moment, not for social media, just for herself. This was her family now, not traditional, not what she'd planned, but perfect. Her daughter was happy, connected, growing. And Maya had learned something crucial. Success wasn't just about quarterly earnings and market shares. It was about this, watching your child feel safe, seen, understood. The penthouse she'd bought felt empty most nights, but Noah's small apartment, filled with Max's drawings and Ari's growing collection of visual communication cards, that felt like home. 1 year later, the Quiet Hearts Initiative by him had expanded to 14 cities, helped over 3,000 families. Noah's favorite moment was still the smallest ones, like now, watching Max and Ari perform at the national conference. 500 people filled the auditorium, parents, educators, therapists. The stage was dimmed, soft blue lighting, no loud music. Max and Ari walked out hand in hand. Both wore noise-canceling headphones. They didn't speak, didn't need to. They began their dance, the one Noah created in a hallway during a crisis, hands creating patterns in the air, feet stepping in rhythm. It wasn't traditional dance, but it was beautiful. The audience watched in silence. Many crying, they understood. They'd lived the struggle to connect with their children. And here were two kids building a bridge, showing it was possible. When they finished, gentle applause filled the room. Maya stood backstage, Noah beside her. "A janitor saved my company's reputation," she whispered. Noah smiled. "I just mopped floors." "You saved my daughter's world," Maya continued. You saved me. She took his hand. Natural after a year together. Somewhere between parent meetings and watching their kids bloom, they'd become something more. Partners. A year ago, I was invisible, Noah said. Nobody saw me. And now? Now I have purpose. A chance to help kids like Max and Ari everywhere. He looked at her. But the best part? I'm not invisible to you. Maya squeezed his hand. You never were. From the moment you helped my daughter, I saw you. Ari ran to them, Max following. We did it, Ari signed. Her verbal speech was improving, but she preferred signing for big emotions. You were perfect, Maya signed back. Max tugged Noah's sleeve. Dad, more families want to learn our dance. Then we'll teach them, Noah said, as many as want to learn. Because that's what this was about. Not programs or viral videos. It was about children who experience the world differently, and people willing to step into their world instead of forcing them into ours. Noah looked at his growing family, the life he never expected. A year ago, he cleaned ballroom floors, invisible to everyone. Now he stood on stages, taught workshops, changed lives. But the real change wasn't his career. It was watching Ari laugh with Max, watching Maya breathe, watching families find hope. It was knowing one moment of compassion created ripples that never stopped spreading. Ari took Noah's hand. Dance again? Noah grinned. Always. The four of them moved together, their rhythm, their language, their family. Sometimes the smallest gesture creates the biggest change. Sometimes connection is the only cure we need. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks sees more clearly than anyone else. Children don't need someone to teach them how to fit in. They need someone willing to step into their rhythm and dance. Subscribe if you believe connection is the language that heals.